Hi, everyone. This is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Once again, we're here previewing DeviceTalks Boston at the end of day one. We're going to have a great panel that's focused on the importance of ASCs, ambulatory surgery centers, in the medtech marketplace. And I am here with Scott Fraser of Fraser Healthcare, who helped me a great deal by assembling this panel. We'll have folks from Olympus and Medtronic and a physician, and Scott is well up there talking about this important medtech market. Scott, thanks for taking a few minutes to preview the panel.
Thanks, Tom, and a special thanks to DeviceTalks. I'm looking forward to it.
We are all as well, and I know it's going to be a very popular conversation to have. So let's talk a little bit about ASCs, just a bit of background. What are they, and what is their penetration in the U.S.?
Well, ambulatory surgery centers have been around since the late 1960s, believe it or not.
And
okay. Although they've become very in vogue, I would say over the last few years, as you have higher acuity cases like total joints and cardiocath procedures migrating to ASCs, the penetration is still somewhat minimal.
Okay.
If you look at the overall procedural volume of elective surgeries in the US, and you really have to look at it by subspecialty. You have, very mature markets like ophthalmology with cataract surgery and gastroenterology with colonoscopy that are over 50% penetrated. But you have other emerging markets like total joints and total knees that, you're still, it's growing quickly, but you might be about 25 to 30% penetrated.
Mm-hmm.
And then areas like cardiac ablation, which is, we're still in the single digits of those cases that have taken place in ambulatory centers, but the writing's kind of on the wall for where they're headed.
What has been standing in the way of faster adoption, or what is no longer in the way that might have been in the way before? What kind of changes are we anticipating?
It's a great question. It's state by state.
Mm-hmm.
So states have what's called CON laws, which are certificate of need laws. And these are basically, in order to build the freestanding ambulatory center, you need to go in front of the state health board to plead your case for why, and a lot of times you're going up against big hospital lobbying groups. So you have certain states that have been very, very slow and restrictive with ambulatory centers, Massachusetts being one of those states. Other states, Florida, Texas, what have you, ambulatory centers are, growing rapidly and heavily penetrated. Outside of CON laws, you have what's called permissible and non-permissible states. And this really pertains to cardiac catheterization, ablation, any type of high acuity type cases. And it's very political. So you get to certain states like California, where they've been very, very restrictive on allowing higher acuity cases into ambulatory centers. And a lot has to do, when you look at the state statutes, with lobbying efforts by large health systems.
So who is pushing for the ambulatory surgery centers?
It's a great question. It's really the trifecta. Who's not pushing for ambulatory center? It's first and foremost the patient.
Okay.
If you ask your friends and family, loved ones that have had an elective procedure in an ambulatory center versus a hospital, where would they prefer? Secondly, and probably the biggest force driving this, are the payers, led by CMS establishing new codes and coverage, but also self-insured employers are playing a significant role in this, where they're directing patients' behavior or their covered lives' behavior based on the copays. And then providers, the physicians, and there's been a lot of research recently by the AMA, as well as other medical societies, on, quite honestly, just how fed up physicians are practicing in the hospital. When you talk to an interventional cardiologist or an orthopedic surgeon who is waiting 2 to 3 hours for transport in a hospital, or waiting for a room to open up in an OR, they're frustrated. And more importantly, they're hearing from their good friends and colleagues that have opened up their ambulatory centers about the quality of life and the increased income that they're earning in these ambulatory centers. So it's a lot of peer pressure there too. And, you know, I think overall, on top of that, there's this wave of momentum of investment dollars that is fueling the growth from private equity, as well as hospital systems are fueling the de novo growth of new builds for ambulatory centers. So it's a combination of forces, but really being led by the patient.
So all the players, or all the people, all the forces that are pushing for ASCs, I think are all critical parts of the medtech market, all important people, important forces for medtech companies. How should medical device companies be looking at this push toward ambulatory surgery centers? And I believe we'll be covering this in your panel. What are they, or should they be doing differently?
I think the first thing that they need to do, and my firm spends a lot of time working with a variety of clients on this, is recalibrate their commercial teams to what is an ambulatory center. What are the KPIs within an ambulatory center? What's the investment thesis?
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, 95% of all ambulatory centers are for profit. So you're selling to business owners. You're not just selling to a value analysis committee or a clinical decision board that's that they're looking at peer review. They're looking at safety data. That is critically important to ambulatory center decision and adoption of new technology, but as is the performa and what your technology is going to do for that ambulatory center's EBITDA or KPIs that will drive that EBITDA.
So let's talk a bit about the panel you've put together for Boston. Why don't we talk a bit about who will be on the panel, and what are some of the conversations that you hope we'll have?
Yeah, we have a great panel constructed because first and foremost, we have a physician, and Dr. Anne Marie Joyce is a longtime friend of mine who I've known really throughout her career. And not only is she one of the country's top leading interventional gastroenterologists, she trained at Penn, she was faculty at Penn, and then she was head of Leahy Clinic, the interventional endoscopy group there. Recently, she joined private practice and is now working out of an ambulatory center. And this one's very near and dear to my heart because this is where my family members, particularly my mother, are treated.
Okay.
It's outside in Metro West in Boston. She's been practicing there for about 2 years now and has a really neat perspective where she headed up a value analysis committee in a big academic hospital and now works at an ambulatory center. And she'll talk a lot about, what's life like on the other side. Secondly is a longtime friend of mine and colleague, Kirk Cannon, who's vice president of Olympus. And Olympus is a dominant market share in GI endoscopy with close to 65–70% market share, but is being challenged in the ambulatory center. And I thought would give a good perspective there. And last but not least is Julie Cole, who is at Medtronic and heads up their enterprise ASC team across all Medtronic divisions and how Medtronic is looking at ambulatory centers. So it will definitely give a good perspective of the largest med tech company in the world, how they're thinking about ambulatory centers and the growth of ambulatory centers. But I think more importantly, down to the physician that shifted out of big academic medicine into a private practice, and a private practice ambulatory center that has private equity owned, as well as a JV with AmSurg.
Interesting. So we know Stryker has been taking an aggressive look at ASCs. We just spoke with Ivan Tornos, CEO of Zimmer Biomet. They're taking a stronger focus there as well. You mentioned some of the bigger companies on the panel. Looking at medtech more broadly, we'll end with this question. I mean, do companies of every size, startups, single product companies, does everyone need to be thinking how they fit into an ASC? Is this going to be an important part of their market going forward?
Absolutely. And I think you have to look at different subspecialties, but the areas that I'm most bullish about right now are obviously total joints. You look at orthopedic and spine and rapid migration happening to ambulatory centers. And that's what's fueling a lot of Stryker's growth, if you listen to their earnings calls. But behind that is the cardiocath market. And that market is still emerging with centers being built. These are not multi-specialty ambulatory centers. They tend to be dedicated focus factories for cardio cath, and now also for ablation. And that market's growing rapidly. Another market that is very exciting right now, and I know your team has spent a lot of time focusing on it, is the soft tissue robotics.
Sure.
If you look at cholecystectomy, hernia repair, some of the basic soft tissue robotic surgeries that are taking place, the new generation or the next generation of surgical robots have the ability to lower the OR staffing requirements or the FTEs within an OR. And that has a very significant impact on an ambulatory center because of the labor shortage. So that's an area that I've been looking at very closely and following. And, you know, if you look at some of the peripheral areas as well, you see migration in ENT, you see migration in urology. All the subspecialties are moving, and it's because of the factors that I mentioned before. So it really is a dynamic space that every year is growing rapidly. From a count standpoint, we have close to 6,400 total ambulatory centers that are recognized by CMS or accredited by CMS to date. There's probably another 5,000 to 5,500 non-CMS accredited ambulatory centers. And those are really your plastic surgery centers that are, you know, cash pay type patients. Right. But we have ambulatory centers, I kind of always joke, are on the right side of healthcare reform. The fact that you're increasing capacity within our system, which in certain cities, there's a tremendous backlog to get into hospitals for elective surgeries. You have the same doctor, the same technology, same implant, but being done at anywhere from a half to a third of the cost of the, you know, the associated costs within a hospital setting. So a lot of positive momentum there. And then the investment dollars are heavily flowing into ambulatory centers from private equity.
Fantastic. Well, it's an important growing market, touching a lot of specialties and a lot of technologies. I appreciate your taking the time to talk to us about it today, but more importantly, to help us put together a really important panel for DeviceTalks Boston. You'll be closing out day one on April 30th. Scott Fraser, thanks for joining us, and thanks for being part of DeviceTalks.
Thanks, Tom. Look forward to seeing you and the team in Boston.
Same here.